Hello! So today we created a page that surfaces prejudice. So our audience is between 13 and 15-year-olds, and our learning goals are that 1. Students will understand that race is one factor that contributes to the individual's identity. 2. One's identity has an impact on how they perceive others. And then 3. One's perceptions of others influences the type of behaviors which they associate with others.
We have 3 activities for our students to reach these learning goals. The first activity is for students to insert their information and create an ID form once they click submit. This activity will allow students to see messages as to what racial percentage of the population they are. The second and third activity involve students having to choose 5 traits they associate with each race, as well as indicate which behaviors they associate with which race. Now we actually code out our form to allow for personalized feedback for each student. For example, if the student indicated that they were Chinese and that they were Catholic and stayed in landed property, for example, they would be greeted as such, and they were actually, and in order to prime them for racial identification, we actually coded for each race to be greeted in their own unique language. This was important because we actually wanted them to be primed for their racial identity in order to elicit possible racial prejudices in the later 2 activities.
So now we will move on to the code. So in activity 2 and 3 are combined when trying to collect data. So Jin provided us with ideas on how we could collect data from the form. Once we had understood his logic and the code that he shared with us, we decided to take on the challenge to create our version of the code, as we recognized that we would not always have him there to help us.
So for this second activity, we started by doing a pseudocode to work on the logic behind this part. So we made an array we called our word bank, and we order the words. The first 5 were the positives and the last 5 were the negatives. This is an important component because we will use it later on. So with the help of Jin, we came up with an object that would save the arrays, an array for each of the students' answer to each of the races. And then we also made a series of variables to store their score. So we made, with the help of Jin, the feedback from Jin, we made 4 submit forms, 1 for each race. So for this function, it would make an array, and it would take the information the student wrote in choose in the specific part of Chinese, and it would push it into the array for that race. And then it would call the getScore function, and it would use as a parameter the score, the function score we made in the first part, and then the response. And we did that for Chinese, Malay, Indian, and other races. So for this function, the getScore function, we had as a parameter a score and an array with the answers, the students' answers. So for this array, we did a for loop that it would run. So it should be 5 because they can only choose 5, but we still use the array.length. So this part, it compares the student answer to the first 5 answer for the first 5 words in the initial array, the array with word bank. And if we knew those first 5 were positive, so we added to the score. If it wasn't one of those 5, we knew it was negative, so it would take a
negative score.
Yeah, it would take 1 from their score. And then the function would return the score. According to that, we made another function to give the students feedback depending on their answers. We made a reset part. So if they wanted to do it again, then it would start again. And then depending if their score was more than 0, then they associated more positive trait with Chinese. And if not, they associated more negative traits with Chinese. We did that with each of the 4 races. And that's the code for that second part.
So to simplify our task, because our brains heard it after a while, we changed the options available for activity 3 from the 4 races to simply your race and other races, as you can see right here. Our issue laid in calculating the many possible scores that students could achieve based on their options, which would affect the return feedback. So we hope to eventually change this to the 4 races to allow for this activity to surface more accurate detection of prejudices.
Our key takeaway from this project was the importance of working out the logic of the code before we even attempted to write anything on CodePen. So one whiteboard marker completely emptied out, we finally were able to complete this project as well as the toaster project, which we hope you will enjoy and learn something from.
Goodbye.
See ya!